The 7th of May will see the 10th edition of the Red Bull Wings for Life run. It's a race like no other and everyone is a winner. There is no set track. Participants across the world set off at a particular time and run as fast as they can with no defined finish line. The race ends when a catcher car overtakes them. The car sets off half an hour after the race has begun. Participants range from teenagers to even those in their 80s. Over the last 9 years, over 1 million professionals, enthusiasts and even sporting superstars have run this race. Famous competitors include Neymar Jr., Marcel Hirscher, Karsten Warholm, Lindsey Vonn and Stefano Tsitsipas. All proceeds go towards spinal injury research, and till date, the previous 9 runs have raised over $42 million. And to set up that run and also talk athletics, I'm joined from Cardiff by race director of the Red Bull Wings for Life run, Colin Jackson. Remember, he's an athletics legend. He remains one of the greatest hurdlers in history. Colin, I just love the format of the Wings for Life run. Now, WION, the news channel I'm interviewing you for, expands to World is One. And the way I see it, the world is coming together as one for that race next month.
You know, that's a really flawless segue into the Wings for Life World Run. And you're right, the world is coming together for one great cause, and that is to really rid the world of spinal cord injuries. So we're going to try and find a cure. And every single person that participates in the Wings for Life World Run has put some sort of donation, whether it's your start fee to be on the start line itself, whether you're actually donating, whether you're somebody who is it's kind of also giving out the message for us, the importance of trying to find a cure for spinal cord injury. You're doing your job, you're doing your role, because it is something that's really, really important. And the world, like you said, is going to come together on May the 7th, 11 o'clock UTC, to make that magic happen.
Colin, we've seen an explosion of marathons and half marathons in India. Every event has a new ambassador, a legend like you. But you've been race director for 9 years now. This cause clearly looks like it means a lot to you.
Yeah, I have been. And, you know, it's one of these things where spinal cord injury has no prejudice. Spinal cord injury can happen in a split second, in a moment, and not just change the person's life, but change the life of everybody around them. And you know, when the biggest cause of spinal cord injuries are car accidents, then you realize the amount of us every single day put ourselves in that zone where you potentially could have a spinal cord injury. So with that in mind, I think we really got to come together and really understand that we all potentially could have that, and also the knock-on effect it just has for everybody, not just the person, the patient who suffers it, unfortunately. So I've got this real drive to try and get this message across to as many people as I possibly can, that with money, we can buy the time of great scientists, and if we buy the time of great scientists, then we 100% can find that cure.
Colin, we're talking about sport for all. You are a global voice. You've competed at the Olympic Games where everyone is equal. But just look around, sport is today divided. As a sports person, how do you react to the talk of a potential Olympic boycott?
You know, it is always, because I talk now as a sportsman, right? And I always feel that you want the best of the world to be at these big competitions and these big events. You want to see everybody competed in that sense. But also, you know, the link, as I said earlier, the link within sport and society in general. Sport is a huge place where people tell stories and make messages known. Tell people how they feel about circumstances, about situations. And if they feel things are unjust, that's when the top sportsmen and women potentially are going to stand up and stand out and let their voice be heard. Now, is it the right time? Is it the right place? Well, that's up to the individual to decide that. So for me, it's really important that that we athletes don't get their voices quashed. And I think federations, governments, governing bodies should always stand out and stand up for what they consider to be right.
Colin, the Olympics have seen two major boycotts, going back to Moscow 1980, Los Angeles 1984. In fact, you won a silver in Seoul when the Olympic boycott ended. Everyone was back competing together. Do you think this is a moment of reckoning for the Olympic movement? We all know what's going on in Ukraine. All our sympathies with Ukrainian sportspersons. But if the IOC buckles under pressure, then will the sanctity of the Olympics be lost forever?
No, it's a tough question, and I don't know, and that's the easy answer. I know it sounds like that's the answer, that's the obvious answer, but I'm not a fortune teller. The Olympic Games, the movement is so powerful. It engages so many young people at exactly the same time who have aspirations, desire, not just to become champions, but also just to become Olympians. It has something that they've dreamt of. So the importance for us is to make sure that people allow their dreams to be fulfilled in some shape or form. So I think the Olympic Games, the Olympic movement itself, is really something that will have legs, will have longevity in that sense, just because it has that power of the dream.
Colin, I'm just going to focus on your sport. It's strange to ask this to a legend of athletics, but is your sport dying a slow death because the attention span of the fan is limited to the Olympic Games, the World Championships, and perhaps the European Championships? Stadiums today are half empty, the schedule is confusing, and TV ratings are down.
You're right. And I think you should never be embarrassed to expose those things. I think that's really important that we do that, because then it gives the governing body, the federation, the opportunity to shake things up and really dissect what it will take to make our sport be the top sport again. We're always lucky that the Olympic Games happens every 4 years. And of course, it creates the biggest sports stars. I mean, Usain Bolt came out of Beijing Olympic Games and he transcended his sport of athletics, as you know quite clearly. So our sport athletics will always have and be able to ride on the back of the Olympic Games. But it's really important that we can really stand alone in that sense and make our championships, world championships, European championships, really outstanding with talent. So when you mention, you bring it up, I think that's really important because it just gives opportunity for people to open their voice and to speak. Our fan base really is quite old, and I think we should target that fan base a little bit more. We try to be a little bit youthful, engage the youth, but the youth are engaged in other things and other projects. So for us, it's just like, don't turn your back on your fans. I think that we may have done that a little bit too much, and we could be paying a consequence for that.
Colin, somebody who competed at the same time as you, athletics fellow legend Michael Johnson, he's been rather vocal about how to turn the sport around. He's even offered a very interesting model on social media recently. Essentially, he's saying athletics needs to do a live golf. Are you in agreement that the sport needs to be reimagined?
I think what it is, to be honest, the sport has been in the hands of the same people, literally the same people since I was competing. And I retired in 2003. And so you've got to think, you've got to have that shake-up of the sport. It's got to really come into line with 21st century living and what engages young people nowadays as well. So you've got to have that right structure put in place. And I think, what Michael's saying is to shake it up, potentially give the event to other organizations that can put on high entertainment shows. We'll shake it up a little bit and it'll allow the athletes again to make more money, to make the sport a little bit bigger. We'll never lose the purity of the Olympic Games, where the sport will be at its purest again. So why not jazz it up, make it a little bit funky? And yeah, let's see what can happen. Because, what can go wrong? It can't get any worse, for sure.
You mentioned the word purity. One of the highlights of the Wings for Life run is that everyone can run. What do you think about the new rules on female eligibility in your sport? The DSD regulations are now more stringent, and there's a full ban on transgender athletes as well.
That's an interesting question because, there's only a small minority of people who go into those groups that you just mentioned. And so, we've got to try and do, the sport has got to kind of make sense to the world of appeasing everybody. So I think what Lord Cole's done, what the president of World Athletics have done recently, is say, do you know what, we can't have this happening at this particular moment in time because we haven't got enough science on basis in it. So let's not introduce it and disrupt female sport, which is ultimately the most important thing. So for me, it's always finding the right balance that will suit everybody, so that, like you say, everybody can participate in a great sport. Because if you think about it, athletics is the foundation for every single sport. Running, jumping, movement, it's needed across every single sport. In cricket, I used to play cricket well. I know I was a fast bowler. Be able to sprint well made a difference when I was steaming in towards that wicket. So, it's that kind of combination of things that we shouldn't ever forget, that athletics is the real core of everything.
You have Caribbean roots. Why am I not surprised that you used to be a fast bowler? On that note, Colin, thank you for your time and inputs. I'm no runner myself, but come the 7th of May, I intend to do my bit and plod along.
My pleasure.